Just how historically accurate can a strategy game be? Can it offer a glimpse into the past, or will it always be restricted for gameplay purposes? I've decided to take one combat mission scenario from the Operation Market Garden module by the horns and really take a deep dive into what happened there historically and see how the game holds up portraying that. And I do mean a deep dive. This is the Dreijenseweg in game.
And this is the Dreijenseweg in real life. In this video I'll be playing the combat mission scenario Drive on the Dreijenseweg as close as I can to the actual British plans and strategies used at the time and see where that takes me in this scenario. While also exploring the actual battlefield location and of course comparing that to the combat mission map. So the German counterattack would have come from that side of the road. And this is the exact location of the anti-tank gun in the real world.
Operation Market Garden was about quickly capturing a series of bridges with airborne troops, enabling the rest of the army to rapidly advance into the Netherlands. The furthest bridge that would famously turn out to be a bridge too far was at Arnhem. It was believed to be only lightly defended, although the Dutch resistance had warned the Allies that there were 2 SS divisions recuperating in the area. But Allied High Command said,
"How about no, you crazy Dutch bastard?"
and went on with the operation. So when on the 17th of September the first 3 battalions of the British 1st Airborne Division landed, only 1 out of 3 made it to the bridge that day under the command of Lieutenant Colonel John Frost. The other 2 battalions were unable to break through the hastily assembled German defences, meaning that Frost and his men would be on their own at the bridge. On the second day 3 more battalions landed, including the battalion that will be following in this scenario, the 156th. The 156th was commanded by Lieutenant Colonel Richard Devoe, and under him he had A, B and C Company. So let's check that in the combat mission scenario. There he is, the name checks out. A Company was commanded by Major John Pott, whose grandson would later write a song about what happened to his grandfather during the battle portrayed in this very scenario. We'll take a look and listen to that at the end of the video. Major Pott wrote a detailed account about what happened during this battle, which will be very helpful in recreating the British actions during this scenario. B Company fell under the command of the then Major and later Colonel John Waddy. Colonel Waddy has since often revisited this battlefield, and in 2011 he gave a battlefield tour that was recorded and put on YouTube.
We lost this battle, and there are many reasons for it.
And lastly, C Company fell under the command of Major Geoffrey Powell. Major Powell would be the only one of these officers to come out of the Battle for Arnhem unharmed. Soon after landing, it became clear that things were not going as planned. The 156th Battalion was ordered to advance on Arnhem along the railway line to assist in breaking the encirclement of Frost and his men. However, it soon became dark, and when the battalion ran into German defensive positions, they halted for the night. Orders were then to resume the advance by first daylight, and that's where we find ourselves at the start of the combat mission scenario.
Duly at first light, C Company set off and came up through the woods and took up a position quite easily on point 56 near the Dreijenseweg. It was the job of my company to give them supporting fire from the other side of the railway.
So the colonel says that while C Company took up positions on point 56.5, his own B Company was by the railway line in the south to support them. This places B Company outside the boundaries of the scenario map. Yet as we can see in the scenario, B Company is on the map with the rest of the battalion. So to accurately play this scenario as it happened in real life, I will keep B Company back until further notice. As the colonel mentions, C Company took point 56.5, which is also an objective in this scenario, without meeting any resistance. In the scenario, this was slightly different. In the scenario, C Company comes across a couple of German observation posts, which are quickly taken out, and the objective is taken. On the other side of objective 56.5 there's an open field from where you can see towards the Dreijenseweg. Historically, C Company took in position there.
And this is objective 56.5 in the real world. This is the edge of the forest of the objective, and over there you look in the direction of the Dreijenseweg, as you can do in the combat mission scenario. Now, since the next stage of the advance would be led by A Company, the commanding officer of A Company came up here to see if he could scout ahead a bit from here. But unfortunately there was nothing to be seen. You can't see beyond these trees over there, so he did not gain any useful intelligence. Then also the brigadier showed up and told him that speed was of the essence, as Frost and his men really needed help at the bridge.
And so, historically, A Company set out towards the Dreijenseweg along this road. In game, I give my digital A Company the same marching orders and off they go. Now, you might wonder, Whiskey, why are you plunging your company head first into a suspected enemy position without proper recon or fire support?
Because he was pressed by the brigadier to get on into Arnhem. No reconnaissance was carried out by us to see what was the other side of this wood. We had the mortars here, we had a battery of guns. Now, no fire support was given to A Company.
So, to accurately replay the events of 1944 in this scenario, off my troops go, without recon or fire support.
After getting the order to move out, Major Pot notes in his report, A Company set out towards the Dreijenseweg along this woodland drive, or actually on either sides of this woodland drive through the forest. And as you can see, the forest around here is pretty thick and you can't see too far up ahead.
The marching order of the real A Company was 4th Platoon up front, followed by the Major in his HQ, 5th Platoon, the glider pilots and then the AT gun. Now you might say, glider pilots? Yeah, that's a great detail that the scenario got right. When the battalion parachuted in, they landed in a hot drop zone. Because of this, 3rd Platoon was tasked to stay behind to take care of the wounded and prisoners of war, and later 3rd Platoon would be replaced with the glider pilot platoon. So 10 points for the scenario researcher right there. Alpha Company then reaches the edge of the forest. And it's immediately apparent that the Germans have set up their defenses on the other side of the Dreijenseweg. 4th Platoon puts down suppressive fire with their machine guns and quickly springs into the attack. Fourth Platoon manages to reach the road, but the Germans are dug in force on the other side and they can't move on. I also spot a few half-tracks, one of which has decided to win either an iron cross today or a wooden one. A Piat kills the gunner and the driver takes off. So 4th Platoon has run aground and I'll need the rest of the company to force a breakthrough. So far, things are developing as they did in 1944.
When 4th Platoon reached the Dreijenseweg, they couldn't move on because there was too much German fire coming from the other side of the road and from MGs on the flanks, so they were stuck in this ditch. Major Pot then decided to make 4th Platoon the supporting element, supporting the maneuvering element made of 5th Platoon and the glider pilots, who were attacking over the left flank, leaving the machine guns of 5th Platoon with 4th Platoon to strengthen the base of fire over here.
So to mimic the plan of my historical counterpart, I too sent 5th Platoon and the glider pilots to deploy along the road on the left flank to prepare for an assault. And I'm under pressure to move fast as 4th Platoon has already suffered around 50% casualties. When the entire company is deployed along the road, I gain fire superiority over the Germans. So just like Major Pot, I order 5th Platoon and the glider pilots to assault across the road. My glider pilots form a screen on the left, while on the right side, 4th Platoon pins down any Germans on the other side of the road, while 5th Platoon comes in from the flank to mop them up. 5th Platoon makes progress, but it's at a terrible cost. There's foxholes everywhere, and the hail of SMG fire from the paratroopers is not enough to convince the Germans to just give up. They really have to be dragged from their foxholes, and it's a bloody affair. When A Company is done clearing this sector of the Dreijenseweg, they've lost some 60% of their troops. Now, if I were doing things my way, A Company would stay put where they are and wait for the rest of the battalion. But the historical commander of A Company made a different choice in 1944, and so I'll have to follow suit.
After crossing the Dreijenseweg with mainly men from 5th Platoon, Major Pot realized that he was engaged in a futile shooting match with the German defenders, that he could not win with the troops that he had, and seeing no signs of a follow-on by the rest of the battalion, he mustered all the men he could and decided to push towards his objective and dig in there with the aim of waiting there for the rest of his battalion.
Facing overwhelming opposition at the road where the defenders were supported by half-tracks, Pot managed to break through with some 15 or 20 men and made it to the Lichtenbeek Hill without meeting opposition. At this point my A Company is still 32 men strong, but the scenario designer did not get the memo that the real A Company didn't face opposition on the way up the hill. Soon enough, on my way to the Lichtenbeek objective, I am dragging Germans from their foxholes again, losing a painful amount of troopers in the process.
Working their way through that part of the woods in the combat mission scenario, my company took losses left and right. They couldn't advance 10 meters without losing someone else. And I can imagine that it would be like that in real life. It's just so incredibly dense up here. You wouldn't see a defender until you almost stepped on his toes.
Despite their losses, A Company pushes through and nears the Lichtenbeek Height objective. But as they do, I suddenly notice a lot of seemingly moving sound contacts up ahead. And knowing what happened here in 1944, I have an idea of what could be going on.
So Major Pot and his small group made their way to the top of the objective with the aim of digging in, which is where we are right now. But before much digging could be done, they were actually spotted by a German officer, and soon they were attacked by a German platoon of about 40 men. Now, what the British paras did was they held their fire until the Germans were about 20 yards away, and then they charged at them. They successfully drove them off and actually captured a German MG-34, which was then put to use by the British paras.
And sure enough, in the scenario, out of the woodworks and over the road, a German platoon counterattacks straight into my A Company.
So the German counterattack would have come from that side of the road, with my sniper being positioned right here, taking shots at the German attackers coming over the road. It's really crazy to be standing inside a scenario that you've just recently played.
The fact that the opposition on top of the hill was in the form of a counterattack like it was in 1944 really was a pleasant surprise. A difference with the actual events of 1944 is that historically there was a second counterattack by the Germans.
The second attack came about half an hour later, and the plan was to wait for them to get close again and to get among them to make sure the Germans could not shoot at the British paras, afraid of hitting each other. But by this time only 6 paras were still capable of fighting, and so inevitably they had to surrender. Major Pot was wounded in this action, being shot in the hand and in the leg. He was left behind by the Germans.
And so Commander Pot had to wait and hope for the rest of the battalion to break through to his position to pick him up. In the scenario, my Major Pot is doing just fine, chasing some last remnants of the counterattack off of the objective. But after that, I decide to keep A Company where they are. They have carried the battle in this scenario that was designed as a battalion attack all on their own, and they are down to about 30% of their original strength. We're now about 40 minutes into the battle, and historically, around now was the moment that Bravo Company returned from their position by the railway line and Major Waddy reported to the battalion HQ.
And I was told to report to the commanding officer. The colonel said to me, A Company have gone through. So he said. He said, you must cross the road and get on to Lichtenbeek and push on to the next feature. And for some unknown reason, he said to me, there are only some snipers around. He must have heard the racket going on of A Company.
And so B Company moved out towards the Dreijenseweg, along the same road that A Company had taken just moments earlier. Historically, B Company would find out that the Germans had reinforced their line at the Dreijenseweg since the small group of A Company had gone through. And not just with infantry.
And the most deadly weapon was on a half-track, a 20mm flat gun. And firing into these trees here, the 20mm shells burst and the splinters go in all directions.
And I have to give credit to the scenario designer here. Just like in 1944, the 20mm flak guns arrived after A Company's assault, but before B Company arrived. Now, even though I was aware that the flak guns were somewhere along the road, I was caught by surprise when one of them spotted my B Company before they even came out of the woods. And the consequences were dire. My digital Major Waddy is actually among the first casualties of the AA gun. I quickly pull the company to the south of the woods so that I can move through this patch of forest where the flak gun can't see them. The scenario gives the British paratroopers a towed anti-tank gun. I looked it up and it seems that there was indeed at least one present on the battlefield in 1944, but I couldn't find out what happened to it. I decided to use it by setting it up on the woodland drive at some distance from the Dreijenseweg.
And this is the exact location of the anti-tank gun in the real world. I came here to see if it was actually feasible that it would have taken out a German flag vehicle on the Dreijenseweg from this location. But standing here, I can clearly see cars driving by over the Dreijenseweg. Especially if you remember that there were far fewer trees here in this specific area 80 years ago, I come to the conclusion that it's very well possible that that would have happened in real life.
There is still one flak truck left, and I know that it is somewhere on the road, but I'm not sure where exactly or which direction it's facing. Which is problematic, as my troops will have to cross this clearing. To see if it's clear, I send one platoon across. Nothing happens, so I order the rest of the company to get moving. The fact that they are in an open field seems to have saved them, as shells don't explode on nearby trees. Half the company is now across, and the other half I managed to pull back in time before they walked into the flak's crosshairs. And I do what I should have done from the get-go: create a smokescreen with smoke grenades. Historically, Colonel Waddy took another approach to this problem.
It was an open clearing there, and I hesitated for a bit before crossing. Major in charge of the support company came up with me. We heard the noise of low-flying aircraft. So he said, Spitfires, let's get across.
Those Spitfires were actually German fighters, but neither are in this scenario, so I'll have to make do with my smokescreen. But my man just can't catch a break, as a perfectly timed German mortar barrage comes in. Between the flak gun and the mortar barrage, Bravo Company has now lost some 35 men already, without having fired a single shot at the enemy. But the entire company has now crossed the clearing and has started to hunt the flak truck. Historically, the Polish brigade was set to land nearby a few hours from now, and it would be bad manners to leave 20mm anti-aircraft cannons roaming about. Luckily, the Germans have not reinforced their line with infantry like they did in 1944, so the men of B Company can just move to flank the flak truck, and Jansen is ordered to volunteer to take it out with a Piet. It's only then that I realized that you really don't need anti-tank weapons to take out an open-top vehicle. In combat mission, a few bursts from SMGs at close range are enough to take it out, and with that, I've broken the German defense at the Dreijenseweg. It wasn't quite like that in 1944.
Up the track was one of these twin-barrel 20mm that was causing the trouble.
Now, Major John Waddy actually led a few men himself against the anti-aircraft gun in an attempt to take it out.
And we got within 10 yards of it, and as one of my men was about to throw a phosphorus grenade onto the half-track, he was shot. And what I didn't realize, there was a bloody little crack up the tree above, and he shot me.
And he was out of the fight, although he was saved by a fellow paratrooper. And he was taken back to behind the British paralines.
With A and B companies more or less at half strength, we had enormous casualties there. There was no way of getting across. The rest of the battalion tried to make one or two more attacks, but without success. The opposition was too strong.
Which means that Major Pott, who was too severely wounded for the Germans to take him with them, was waiting for help that wouldn't come.
We managed to discover the spot where my grandpa lay wounded for 20 hours. This song, Black Swan song, is a lot of it's about that moment. I lost too many friends I could count on and on. They'll be the first to welcome me.
So for 20 hours he lay there wounded, and when he thought that he wasn't going to make it, he started to write a letter to his wife with his one good hand. This really happened, and it's sort of the focal point of the video clip. I recommend you watch it. The link is in the description. Then Major Pott was found by two Dutchmen who happened to walk by. They carried him to a hospital and then tried to hide him from the Germans, but he was eventually discovered and he spent the rest of the war in captivity. Like I said, my digital Major Pott is doing well, even though his A company took a beating. After B company took out the flak truck and had effectively broken the German defense at the Dreijenseweg, I ended the scenario there, as both my A and B companies were just completely spent. So were there any noteworthy differences between the scenario map and the real world terrain? Just one, really. In the scenario, the German foxholes are right next to the road, while in real life they were a bit further back, where the ground slopes up a bit and you have a great view of the Dreijenseweg from an elevated position. You can still see where the Germans dug in, at least I suspect that these holes are all German positions, but even if not, the hole is in the right spot. This elevated position quite obviously gives an advantage to a defender that was not really there in the scenario, but at least when you play as the Germans, you can adjust this to your liking. So the outcome of the battle was different from 1944, but the road leading up to that point was full of historically correct details that truly gave that glimpse into the past here and there. But I would never have realized that if I had not researched this battle myself for this video. And I now kind of fear that there are scenarios in historical combat mission titles that have tons of research poured into them that most players, including me, never know of, simply because it's not advertised. It's like buying an old map of Normandy in an antique shop, but never realizing that it is precisely the same kind of map that Eisenhower used to plan D-Day. What a shame not to know. Wouldn't it be nice to have a side salad of that historical background info with the main course, is all I'm saying. So how would you overcome the tactical problem that the Brits faced? Colonel Waddy has an idea about that.
If ahead of A company attack, the artillery and the mortars had fired on the road, and as you know, the shells and the mortar bombs burst in the trees and the splinters come down, there could have been no Germans in the slit trenches or in the open half tracks.
He's convinced that artillery would have made the difference. If you'd like to find out more about how to best use artillery in combat mission, click right here. Or watch another one of my videos here. What a ride this video has been to make. Thanks for coming along, and I'll catch you in the next one.